Well, hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very warm welcome to this BA Community webinar. Now, have you heard about OKRs? Perhaps you've wondered what they are. You might be wondering how they relate to or are different from critical success factors, KPIs, management by objectives. Is it just management by objectives by another name? Spoiler alert, it's not. However, I'm really pleased to say that we have with us Allan Kelly, a name that I'm sure needs no introduction. Many of you will know him from the many books that he's written. He's an Agile leader, Agile guide, speaks prolifically and writes some blogs on Agile, and has done webinars here before. So many of you will be familiar with Allan. So Allan, well, thanks for being here. And you are on mute. I know that's the cliched. That's the cliched thing to say in this. Cliched thing to say. So just before we get going, for those of you attending live, do remember you can ask questions as we go along. So do feel free to type your questions in the Q&A window, and we'll cover as many of them as we can as we go along. Also, I'm just putting in the chat now a link to a mural board. So in the chat, you should see a link to a mural board. Again, if you're attending live, it'll be worth just clicking on that link, having it on your second screen or underneath the webinar or whatever. And what this is, oh, it's funny. I've just realised I've got the wrong title on it. But hey, it's a sort of relevant title. So ignore that. But it is about OKRs. It should say succeeding with OKRs.
Freudian slip, I think.
Say again?
Freudian slip.
Yeah, I think so. But if you are attending live, you can just add, as when there's a particular thing that resonates with you that Allan says, just double click and add a post-it note. And this is a great way of collective note taking. You can also add different colors and shapes and stuff as we go along. And what I'll do is I'll create a PDF of this after the webinar finishes. And then we can see what particularly resonates with people. So do, as I say, get your questions coming in. Use the mural board, and then we've got some really great resources out of the back of this as well. So, Allan, a good place to start, I think, would be to say what are OKRs, because some people listening in might have never heard the term before. And how do the O's relate to the KRs?
So the simple answer is OKRs are objectives and key results. And the way people always tell a story is they were invented by Intel, and we all love Intel. Intel's gone to massive success. And they were picked up by a guy called John Doerr, who worked there. And he went on to become a venture capitalist. And he took them to company after company. It became the Silicon Valley way. And he took them to a company you may have heard of called Google. And it sounds like the way he describes it, it was like the blue touch paper. And he would put down all Google's success to Google's success with OKRs. And then there is, in fact, a great quote from Larry Page about the innovative idea is essential, but don't overrate it. Execution is the important thing, and then that's then spun into saying, "Hey, execution is OKRs." I tend to believe, and this goes to the Freudian slip on your mural board, that there's more to it than that. It's not just a case of add OKRs to any company and they will become the next Google. They are a tool, and they've proved very successful in those cases. Haven't heard so many stories about where they haven't worked, which is a little bit suspicious, but maybe we'll come back to that later on. The idea is, and it sounds like a familiar idea, and you mentioned management by objective. In the first instance, OKRs were thought of as Intel's management by objective method. And the idea is, like management objectives, you have an objective, you have something you want to do, the big shiny thing you're trying to get to. And the key results describe that. Well, sometimes you can think of them as acceptance criteria, like you have in a user story. They are the boxes you have to tick. They're the things you have to do to make that objective happen. Sometimes the objectives tend to lend themselves more to the key results being component pieces, which are valuable in their own right, but the whole is more than the sum of the parts. However, word of warning there, if you're experiencing Agile, you may jump to thinking, oh, an objective is an epic and the key results are stories. It's not quite the same relationship. So to try to not think that way, although sometimes it is, there's a thing to do and there's some bits to do. You may also think of key results as more like constraints, or you may think of them as things that need to be done. It's I know a little bit nebulous, but if you think of them more as acceptance criteria, you're on the right lines. And the idea is, like in Agile again, you iterate. You set them for every 3 months, and maybe you spend a week setting them, reviewing last quarters and setting this quarters, and then you got 12 weeks of delivering on these things. And then you repeat, you review and inspect. It's Scrum writ large. But again, it's more than a super sprint. And this is where I start to get excited about them, because one of the things I think they succeed in doing is too many teams which call themselves Agile today are mired in the backlog. The backlogs become tyrannical. It's about delivering the backlog. And you can't see the wood for the trees because you're so busy delivering all these stories that you never get time to step back and think, hey, what's the bigger thing here? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What's our objective? So I think OKRs provide every 3 months, stop, take a breather, slow down, and think about what you're really trying to do, how you're trying to change the world. So the other thing to bring in here, it's been mentioned already a few times, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, management by objectives. So in the 70s and even the 80s, this was a espoused management idea. And in some ways, it's hard to argue with. Tell us what you're trying to achieve. And Peter Drucker, of all people, espoused the idea. It turned out in practice, management by objective didn't quite work like that. And part of the reason was you end up with this cascading hierarchy of people at the top decide what the objective is.
Yeah.
And you have a planning team and they cascade these things down, and thou art told what your objective is, and therefore what your bonus is going to be at the end of the year and all the rest of it. And use the cog in the machine. And it becomes an extra exercise in centralized planning. Now, some people look at OKRs, and some people who are familiar with MBOs, who happen to also tend to be in the more senior management positions, they look at OKRs and they think, oh, this is a new take on management by objective, and they map it into that space. And there's a group of people who say OKRs is cascading down. And you'll hear people say one team's objectives are another team's key results. I don't see it that way. And maybe this is my experience, maybe this is Agile speaking. I'm not the only one who talks about it this way. I think if you just see it as cascading down, you're missing a key element here. And that is that I think done right, OKRs allow a team to paint themselves a box and say, this is what we're doing. This is what the rest of the world, the rest of the organization, the customers, or whoever can expect for us. We are inside this box. We have the autonomy to deliver these any which way. We are the experts here. Consider this, the OKRs, the interface, the API, if you like, to the team. And so I think management, yes, they should paint visions, purpose, mission, even talk about the objectives they want, but they should stop there and they should leave a lot of white space. And then the teams should come back and the team should say, you know what? Well, our expertise is in this area. Our expertise is looking after this product, this service, this platform, whatever it is. And the team should then come back and say, we can support the organization's objectives, and these are the OKRs we are going to sign up to, and they create their own. Now, they don't do that in isolation. They talk to their customers, their users, their stakeholders, everyone else, and they create what they think will benefit, and they consult with people. So I see OKRs not quite as a bottom-up movement, but bottom-up, more bottom-up than top-down. I think I've hit the main points. Hopefully, everyone out there has got an idea what they are.
Yeah, no, Alan, I think it's amazing that you covered so much in a really, really short sort of succinct package there. And I mean, you've actually covered some really key elements of your book in that short opening paragraph. So you're doing yourself you're doing yourself a disservice there.
An advantage. I spent 2 hours this morning delivering an OKR workshop.
Right.
Right. And since I only had 2 hours, that summary of what they are had to be short. So I probably just repeated myself.
Yeah, no, but that's that. I mean, that's really interesting. And so, I mean, if you were to, well, just before I go on to the next question, for those of you who are attending live, I managed to single-handedly talk about the mural and then not properly paste it into the chat. So apologies for that, but I've pasted it into the chat and I can see most of you have found it now, but I'm going to paste the link again, just in case anyone hasn't yet found it. And if you weren't here at the very beginning, the mural is a form of collective note-taking. So put whatever you want to put on there, and do ask, as questions come into your mind, do ask away, and we'll cover those as well. But so, Alan, I mean, that was a really useful summary of what OKRs are. I suppose a question which people may well have there is how can teams practically use those, and what makes them particularly relevant for agile teams? Because I know your book is specifically about OKRs in an agile context. So how about those two sort of topics?
Yeah. So the exciting thing, one exciting thing I see here is, if I start the keywords: governance, projects, collaboration, and so one of the other things I'm known for is the no project movement. And if you subtract the project management model, if you move to a products over project model, or a teams over products model, or a Spotify model, or an agenda shift model, or one of the other models in the ascendancy, what you realize is that what you find is the old style governance that you had on projects of saying, how much of this project have you done? How much of this budget have you spent? Where are you on the schedule? No longer exists, because you've accepted the team are working out what they need to do to deliver value, and you've realized the schedule is open-ended. This may go on forever, and all the rest of it. Yeah. And so this leaves organizations with this, well, how the hell do I govern this? How do I know they're spending my money meaningfully?
Yeah, this is a really, really common, or in my experience, a really, really common tricky problem, and it sort of speaks to the fact that I'm absolutely certain you will have seen this too, Alan, where you've got organisations that will have an agile method of product delivery wrapped in a governance framework, which is I mean, I don't know how I can state this without sounding really overly negative, but it is a very anti-agile. It is a framework that requires a great deal of prediction and commitment in stuff that nobody can actually know, right? How can you know what's going to happen in 3 years' time?
I describe it sometimes as using Agile in the engine room, but up on deck, they're still navigating the old way. Yeah. Which, coming from a seafaring family, you realise that the captain and the chief engineer have to actually be aligned.
That's really interesting, Anna. That analogy is interesting. It's like you've got some really, really sophisticated ship with its engine, and then you've got someone navigating by the stars up on the deck or something. I mean, that's kind of what it's like, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't think you get the full benefit of Agile and digital, because to take a slight sidetrack, I now view Agile as the set of processes and ways of working which maximizes the return from digital technologies. So site sidetrack, I think we have talked about that another time. Go and look in your archive.
Yeah.
Back to OKRs. So the organization is still saying, okay, we get the teams need to be self-managing, self-organizing, autonomous. We get the people who are doing the work know best what they're going to do. But how do we still know they're doing the right thing? And you can get inventive and we can craft solutions, but basically you kind of come back to the idea that there's some checkpoints, there's some kind of portfolio review, there's some kind of governance system, but what are the checks you should be using? And this is where I think OKRs are a role to play. It's that kind of middle level planning between the high level strategic goals, aims, purpose, all of that, and the people down here doing the work. OKRs tend to provide a mechanism which, for the people up top, say this is what we want, and the people on the bottom say this is how we're going to aim for it, and OKRs to communicate between them, and they can both agree on this. Because I don't think the top should be telling the bottom what the OKRs should be, and I don't think the bottom should be telling the top what they should be. I think it's a collaboration. The people doing the work are going to craft them, but they are going to consult with the people up top.
Yeah, so I suppose that's the situation where the people up the top are doing the strategic planning, saying we really need to get into this market and we really need to be going in this direction, the big macro level questions, which then has an impact because we need a new product suite in X. And then you've got people who are actually going to make that happen. And then the OKRs are the sort of piece in the middle, which say, okay, well, here's some objectives that are meaningful to folks who are steering the ship and the people who are actually running the ship, and here's the KRs are the stepping stones towards those O's.
What you can expect from the team.
Yeah.
I know most of your audience is BAs, so please forgive me if this sounds overly technical. When you hear programmers talk about test-driven development, and we are going to set the test for the work we do before we do it.
Yeah.
I sometimes think of OKRs as test-driven management. This is what we're trying to achieve, and this is how we're going to measure our success towards it. This is what we're going for. These are the tests we're going to achieve. Hope that wasn't too technical.
No, not at all. And I mean, we always have a range of folks on these webinars, but you're right, predominantly BAs. I love that. I love that test-driven management, which is a really there's a book in that, Alan. There's a Times best-selling book in that, I think, for you. So
I've already got ideas for another OKR book, but I promised myself there's some other things I need to do this year.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so let's just pause and have a look at some of the questions that are coming in.
Can I just jump in there, Adrian? Because I think I said to you before, I want to, when I do these things, I need to switch the virtual screen off, don't I, everyone? This virtual screen behind me, by the way, is Agile on the Beach 2019. So go and buy yourself a ticket in September on the beach at a conference.
Oh, wow. Real world.
So this is the book. I've got a couple of copies to give away. So I'm going to post a link in the chat. Allan Kelly book tour. If people want to go over there and stick their name and email address in, the email addresses won't get shared, but I will at the end I'll paste the names into a spinner and we'll randomly choose 2 people to receive a book.
Fantastic. Do navigate over to that URL. Definitely well worth doing that.
I'll post them anywhere in the world. Don't worry.
Yeah, anywhere. That's a challenge. So, fantastic. So our first question comes from Walter, and Walter says, "Hi, Alan and Adrian. Is there a relationship between OKR and WSJF, which is weighted shortest job first?"
Short answer: I don't know one. Longer answer: I can spot you're a safe person, and because I didn't know this until after I published the book, but the latest version of SAFE And for those of you who don't know, SAFE is Scaled Agile Framework, which has long contained weighted shortest job first. I learned after I published a book that SAFE has embraced OKRs, and OKRs included in SAFE version 5. I don't know much more than that. Although I did a talk for SAFE Sydney a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of people said to me afterwards that apparently SAFE's interpretation of OKRs isn't completely solid. I don't know, actually what I've been told.
Yeah.
I imagine that in SAFE there might be something about this. I can imagine that if you are doing the analysis of what you want to do, then once you've identified your weighted shortest job, it would make sense to put that job into your OKRs and codify the thing you have decided to do as one of your OKRs for the coming quarter. Now, at the same time, I'm going to caution here, because in the OKR literature, and some people are really signed up to this, there's a lot of emphasis on this idea of aspirational OKRs.
Yeah.
And OKRs that you can 10x, they call them at Google. You can do 10 times better than you expect, and you push yourself, and that all sounds great. But if you're going to do that, you need to accept that you're not going to be predictable, because you're trying to shoot for the moon. And if you want to do all the analysis and make sure you're going to hit the moon, then really you're not being ambitious, are you? Because you're trying to get beyond the comfort zone.
Yeah.
So there's a conflict between predictability and ambition. And if you've done the weighted shortest job first, and you know which is the highest value, and you know which is the shortest, I'm going to question whether you're really being aspirational.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer. I'm just saying I can imagine them being used together. I can also imagine a bit of a conflict here.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because is there an element of, if there's a level of predictability, then that implies an element of either analysis or repeatability, which means it's not something that's, or it's unlikely to be something that's novel. And if it's not something that's novel, it's probably potentially less innovative. Might be an interpretation. So fantastic. Let's move on to a question from I think Francisco. If I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I apologise. But Francisco asks, have you any advice for companies starting with OKRs? Any idea on how to help changing the governance? I mean, great question, because governance is really, really culturally ingrained in many organizations.
Yeah. So, there's two questions there, isn't it? Company starting. Let's take it one at a time. Company starting. I think JDFI, just start doing it. Just sit down with your team and say, let's pause, take deep breath. For the next 3 months, what are we shooting at? And I think we can come back to backlog later. That's an important question, come back to later. And I encourage you and the team to sit down and think about what you know, as a Spice Girls would say, what do you really, really want? Your mission, you know, and get away from the nitty-gritty day-to-day stuff. Think big, and as a team, start crafting your okay. I guarantee that in 3 months' time, when you look at the OKRs you wrote 3 months ago, you'll see how they can be improved. It's a learning journey, and you probably never stop learning, but particularly the first few times out, you're learning quite a lot. You're learning rapidly. So just get started, get the learning cycle started. Now, I would say, and you know, I'm going to use the C word. Some of the things we talked about so far can be related to culture, and this is one, the culture. If you've got an organization where people expect to be told what to do and people expect to tell you what to do, I think you're going to struggle a bit with OKRs, particularly the aspirational side of things. going back to the whole MBO discussion. So your, so I say product owner type person, whether that is somebody who's designated product owner, whether you have a product manager or a business analyst, somebody else who's responsible for heading up what should the team be doing, they are probably going to lead on OKRs because their specific role is to understand what the team's customers and stakeholders want. They don't set them for the team, but they are certainly the person who I expect to have the specialist skills to find out and to have that knowledge because they're doing that. They're going to lead on that. And they're going to want to know what people want from them. And when you've got your OKRs, your first, take them to your next person up. Who do you report to? Who's more senior than you? Take them to your key stakeholders and show them and say, if this is what we aim for the next 3 months, what do you think? Is this the right thing? Because OKRs are a communication technique as well. So finally, on how to adopt them, one of the things I always loved about Agile was anyone could start doing some of the Agile practices. And the more people who do, the more practices, the more builds up. And almost the higher level support can come along later. OKRs is slightly different. Yes, your team can start going through the motions and start writing them just because the team decides. You can't really decide on your own. You need your team to decide. And you're much more quickly going to find that you need people with seniority to come in and support you. Because going back to the governance question, you're starting to explain to people what you're doing in terms of your objectives and key results. And I remember one of the teams I was working with a couple of years ago, we were in a meeting and it fell to me to talk about the OKRs the team had set for themselves. And somebody from another team was listening in said, and what percentage of these do you expect to get done? What are you certain about doing? And I said, well, I think we can expect 70%, because that's the figure Google gives. That's what's in the books. The organization should have had that conversation publicly. They didn't. I quoted the Google figure because that's what the team have been talking about. The person who asked the question and the other people on the call were horrified. What's the point of giving us a list where you're going to do 70% of them? We want 100%.
Yeah.
Culturally, you're going to need, someone's going to need to give you a guide on whether you should be aiming for 100%.
Yeah.
And predictability is key, or whether aspiration and acceptance of failure is acceptable.
And that's, I mean, that's a really interesting cultural question, isn't it, Alan? Because with the, organizations that want those moonshots, that want things that are really innovative, have to, I would say, have to embrace that culture of continual learning. And part of continual learning is that some things won't work. Now, you and I would probably agree that even organizations that would say they meet 100% of the things on the list probably have a few failures that are just failures that are dressed up to look like successes because they're on time and on budget, which, by the way, means very little if it's not actually creating any value. But that's a whole different topic.
Another aside. Okay, let's go through the motions. Failure is not bad. We learn from failure. We need to re-examine failure. All of it. I agree. Yeah, okay, I agree. Except we're taught from a very early age that failure is bad.
Yes.
And it's going to be decades before we get it out of our system. But actually, there's an upside to failure. When you fail, you want to change. You're motivated to do things differently. When you succeed, you have no motivation to do something different.
Yeah.
If you fail at something, but you dress it up as success, you fail twice. You failed at it, and you fail to harness the motivation to change next time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting point as well. So, okay, so we're about at the half-time mark now. So what I'm going to do is always slightly terrifying. So on my other screen now, I have the mural board set up where people who are watching live have been taking notes. So I'm just going to share that now on my screen.
Yeah, I can see the Mark's questions next up, and an old friend. So can I answer Mark's question?
Yeah, well, let's just have a quick look at the mural board, but definitely let's get to get to Mark's question. So we've got people taking notes in various ways. We've got a little diagram down the right hand side. We've got the middle level planning. Execution is the important thing. Product over project model. OKRs are test driven management. So a lot of things being captured. So as a reminder, I will post a PDF version of this after the session, and just in case you're joining the session late, because I know often some people join on the half hour because of commitments or whatever, I'll just again in the chat just put a quick link to the mural board in there. So fantastic. Well, let's move on to Mark's question. So Mark asks, he's wondering whether strategy comes from above or from the left early in the value stream. So wow, where do you start with that one, Alan?
All of the above.
No, you see, now that's like the BA answer, which is it depends. I can't let you off the hook with that one, Alan.
So we mentioned Intel earlier on, and Andy Grove, who was the Intel COO and his CEO for many years, is credited as the inventor of OKRs. So I'm going to refer to Andy Grove a bit on this. If you read his book, I think it's he's written a couple. I think it's Only the Paranoid Survive, which is a good read. He tells the story of when Intel moved from the memory chip business to the CPU chip business, which Intel was founded as a memory chip business. Producing CPUs was a secondary thing they wandered into. And it came to a point where the board made this big strategic decision that the money was in CPUs and they were going to become a CPU company. And they then started to communicate this down the hierarchy and push the message out to their people. And to their surprise, a lot of their managers kind of turned around and said, yeah, I'm glad the board have finally realized this. And according to Andy Grove's account, a lot of the decisions that needed to follow from the board's strategic pivot were already in process, because at the lower levels in the organization, people had made these decisions and already started to pivot the organization.
Yeah.
The board was almost following what was happening on the ground. And part of Grove's rationale here is the people on the ground, the people who are making the sales and making the products, are much more in contact with the market and the customers, and they have better information.
Yeah.
And so I don't subscribe to the Porter-esque view of strategy as set at the top comes down. We could have a wonderful conversation about strategy sometime, but cut the long story short, I'm much more a fan of Henry Mintzberg and the idea that strategy is emergent.
Exactly.
And so, yes, some of the strategy comes from above, people at the top saying, you know what, we need to get into the CPU business. And some of the strategy comes from the value stream mapping and slowly realizing, hang on, these value streams are telling us there's a pattern emerging here. This is the third value stream where this has come up. And again, what you need is these wonderful feedback loops, which are all interlocking and they're all moving on their own independent timescales.
Yes, yeah, and but they're moving at their own independent timescales, but they need to synchronize at certain key areas, and I suppose OKRs are a way of keeping that elements of them in sync. So Nefra adds a comment about Matthew Side's book Black Box Thinking, which relates to when we were talking about failure, and I think that's a really good observation as well. And for those of you that haven't come across Matthew Side's work, it's well worth looking at. And Black Box Thinking is a really good book which talks about how the aviation industry has, aviation is safe because aviation has learnt from plane crashes. But every time there's a plane crash, they will thoroughly investigate why it's happened and make sure it hasn't happened again. I know there's been slip-ups recently, but nevertheless, a really interesting, point. So, okay. So Anissa asks, how do OKRs differ from project deliverables? Because and I can see what Anissa means, because at the outset they do sound like, you know, there would almost be the temptation to put them on a delivery plan. Do you know what I mean?
So I think the answer there is that we don't have symmetry. You could take a project with deliverables and you could re-encode that as a set of OKRs. However, you could not necessarily take a set of OKRs and reverse engineer out a project and deliverables from it.
Yeah.
Partly the answer, see above about aspiration and planning, the aspirational element. And partly because a project implies that you know what you're doing. You kind of know the thing you're building. OKRs, you may know what you're doing, or you may be saying, our goal is to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade.
Yeah.
And when you say that, you don't actually know how you're going to land a man on the moon. And face it, Kennedy didn't know, and NASA didn't know. They'd done studies on it, but you know, it wasn't until 63, 64 they decided there was going to be a thing called the lunar lander. You are potentially challenging the team to find a strange new mission, to seek out and explore strange new ways. It's more of a challenge. So yes, OKRs could be project deliverables, but not the other way around.
Yeah. We've got a question that's been submitted anonymously, and for those of you attending, do feel free to submit questions anonymously if you would prefer. The question is, can you give an example of a key result that is linked to an objective and an example of a user story that tries to achieve that KR? So do you see that lineage from objective to key result through to user story? Is that the sort of architecture you'd envisage, Alan?
Yes. Although we keep skirting on the backlog question.
Yeah.
I see OKRs as a story generator. You have a set of objectives you need to make, and you have a set of key results, and some of those key results may drop quite nicely into a user story as they are. So think of an example. I don't have my stock of examples immediately at hand. I'd have to read through them. So I'm sorry, Anonymous. You put me on the spot for a moment. I need to think of an example. But yeah, there are times when I expect you will find. Okay, suppose you've got an objective to deliver a payroll processing system, and one of the key results is that the payroll is processed within an hour. You could quite easily write a use story that says, as a payroll manager, I would like the payroll run to be complete in a fast time frame, blah, 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 acceptance criteria, payroll run completes in under an hour.
Yeah.
I could start mapping quite easily.
So and that probably leads us on to the broader question, Alan, which is a really important one about how OKRs relate to the backlog. So is it, should people expect there to be a neat, traceable hierarchy, or is it a bit more chaotic than that?
Let me answer that by telling you a story.
Always the best way. So
so a few years ago, before the pandemic, remember those days?
Only vaguely. Only vaguely.
I'm part of an Agile coaching team, and and there's other coaches working with other development groups. We all had the pattern. We have 2 or 3 teams each, and as Agile coaches, we felt OKR has been dropped on us, and we were manically trying to catch up with it. And we kept hitting the backlog. How do we increase the backlog? And there's one coach in particular, Inga, her name was. I remember talking about this. And which follows which? Does the backlog follow OKRs? OKRs follow backlog? And I come to the conclusion that the OKRs win the primacy, and we should set our OKRs irrespective of the backlog. When we came to do a sprint, we should look at the OKR and we could say, is there something in the backlog that can help us with this? And if there is, we could pick it out and do it. And if there wasn't, we could write it. And she had come to the conclusion that the backlog was in the primacy, and the OKRs were a mechanism on top of this, and therefore we should look at the backlog and what we were going to do for the next 3 months, and we should craft OKRs that kind of summarize that. So we had an experiment.
Oh, wow.
And for the next 3 months, we pursued our strategies. And 3 months later, I sat down with her over coffee and we talked about what happened. And cut a long story short, she said, I'm going to do it your way. It goes back to this seeing the wood over the trees.
Yeah.
And it allows you to see this. So many things are bogged down in the nitty-gritty of the backlog and churning through stories and burning down the backlog, which never gets burned down.
Yeah.
OKRs are more strategic. Step back, take a deep breath, set them. And so I think, I just throw the backlog away. Most places that's going to be about as popular as a lead balloon. So just ignore your backlog. Set your OKRs, get your objectives, get people to agree to your objectives. If you remember, or if you're thorough and there's something in the backlog that will help you, by all means, do it in one of the sprints. But if there's not, just write the damn thing, inject it in your backlog and say, look what I found.
Yeah.
The OKRs, because OKRs relate to mission and purpose and are strategic, they take primacy for me over the backlog. And so the backlog should follow. And I'll throw in another idea here. It goes back to getting rid of this tyranny of the backlog. If you read about Amazon, Jeff Bezos has this idea he calls day zero. That every day is day zero. Every day you have a blank sheet of paper and you decide what you're going to do. And that's important because that gets rid of the sunk cost problem, for one. But it means that you're constantly, maybe not every day, but on a regular basis, you're confronting yourself and saying, what should we be doing? And I'd like teams to get away from the backlog. The backlog was a great idea 15, 20 years ago when we invented it, but it's become a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
So I really want teams to enhance their autonomy and product owners and coaches step up and be more strategic by thinking about the real problems you're trying to solve, your real objectives. And the backlog, I'd almost delete it at the start of every quarter and recreate it as you go through the quarter, which is why I say the objectives and the key results are a story generating machine.
Yeah, that's interesting, and the whole linking back to the problem so powerful. So let's we've got quite a few questions coming in. So what I'll do is I'll link a few together, and we'll see. We'll try and get through as many as we can. So Anissa asks another excellent question, which is how many key results should you have per objective? And I'll combine that with an anonymous question we've had, which is how do we know the OKR is going to happen in a certain period of time? So Alan, how many KRs per each O, and how do you know how long it's going to take you?
The more KRs you have, the more likely it's going to happen. So I heard yesterday that there's somebody espousing one OKR.
Oh, okay.
I have a lot of sympathy with that. And I think for some teams, that is going to be spot on. If you are, in Google terminology, having a moonshot, then you've got one objective. That doesn't necessarily make Google's moonshot more reliable, more predictable. But if predictability is in the ascendancy, then fewer OKRs. More generally, my rule of thumb is 3 OKRs and 3 key results each.
So 3 by 3.
Yeah. If you twist my arm, 4 and 4. But now let's, as the Americans say, do the math. Typically, OKRs work on a quarterly cycle. A quarterly cycle is 13 weeks. That means you've got 6 sprints and the odd week, which either you end up with some 12-week quarters and some 14-week ones, or you have a free week, which theoretically is the time to set your OKRs. Within those 13 weeks, if you've got 9 things to deliver, things required, that is only slightly more than 1 week of work per key result. And the other end, if it's 16, that is less than 1 week of work. And if your key results and objectives are so small that there are a few days, I don't think you're thinking strategically. So reverse engineering it out so that we're working on a quarterly time frame. 9 to 16 feels like the right thing. And I get worried when I see a long list of these things, because first of all, you may be recreating your backlog.
Yeah, you're just creating a backlog of KRs.
And the more you have, the less focus you're going to have. One of the key things about OKRs is they create focus. And if you've got 20 of these things, how are you going to focus?
Yeah.
Before you tell me you've got 20 people on your team, well, if you've got 20 people, this means you need to get more reason to rally around them.
Yeah.
But 20 people can't focus on 20 things. Maybe 5 people can focus on 4 things, and maybe splitting your 20 people into multiple teams might make sense. But OKRs can't solve your organizational question, they might highlight it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the how many. Predictability, if you look at your OKRs, if the objective of the key result, if there are things which really, really need to happen, then asterisk them, mark them, highlight them, whatever you do. And again, don't have too many of them, you'll get away with a couple. But just call out that those things really, really need to happen, and they probably should be prioritized before the others. If you want to get fancy, think about what their deadlines, what their due dates are, their best before dates, if you like, and maybe even think about their use by dates. Is there a date where this thing, if it is delivered after, will be less valuable? Is there a date where if this thing is delivered after, it will be valueless? You know, if you are delivering Christmas presents to kids in London, delivering them on January the 29th has a lot less value than December the 25th, and delivering them in January really doesn't count.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, so let's take a question from Nefra. So Nefra asks, does this mean that there is a chance that there will be sudden changes of direction for a team more often, as in realizing that where they were heading is no longer perhaps where people actually want? And I think this is relating to when we were talking about learning and the 3-monthly cycle. So does that actually, I mean, I suppose this relates to your comment about Mintzberg and emergence again. So, but would you say that what Nefra is saying there is correct?
I suppose it depends on how often you're used to this happening.
Yeah.
I could imagine, yes, for some teams, this is going to feel like sudden changes, because every 3 months you sit down, you wipe the slate clean, and you say, right, where are we, what are we going to do? For other teams, deciding every 3 months is going to be, what? You wait 3 months? I hope, and the way I want to play the game is OKRs give you 3 months of pretty much certainty. To borrow from Scrum, you could have an abnormal termination of OKRs. You could wake up one morning and find, oh my God, there's a pandemic. We suddenly need to stop what we're doing and start working from home and do things completely different. And you are absolutely right to do that. You mustn't close yourself off to the outside world. But for some teams, the problem is that it feels like every day somebody or other is telling them there's a pandemic and they need to change radically. And I feel as if about 3 months is the right period to stop and review your strategy and review what you're doing and think. And it may be that every 12 months you stop even more and you breathe even deeper and you think even harder. And it may be every 5 years you think even harder, or maybe you've got specialists who do that. But so I want a team every 3 months to stop and have a long, hard think. In between times, you're going to be doing sprint planning and you're going to be doing stuff which hopefully are like the OKRs. But maybe you're one of those teams which also needs to firefight. You've also got BAU to do. Now, if you're working towards your objective and a fire breaks out somewhere, it would be quite negligent to ignore the fire.
Yeah.
And there are times where you have to say, we have to stop pursuing our objective and we need to fight the fire. There are other times where it would be right to say, I know something is burning over there, but in the new world that we are heading for, that is not as valuable as the new world, or in the new world that doesn't exist. And I want you to make a conscious choice, fight the fire or not. But if all you ever do is fight fires, then you will only ever be a firefighter.
Yeah. And that's something that, that's a pattern of feedback loop that we've probably both seen quite a lot, where everything is stuck in important and in urgent and important. So nothing that's important and not urgent ever gets done, which means that nothing ever really changes. So let's just bring in a comment and another question. So Mark says, regarding day zero, Gandalf said, I mean, that's a great way to start. Gandalf said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us, which, I mean, there's so much wisdom there, I think. So
somebody's reading from the book. That quote is in the book.
Excellent.
So I may have told this story before to your, are you viewers or listeners out there? Some of you are listening on the iPod, and some of you are watching it. I may have told this before, but I have an exercise I do with teams, and I say, right, I want you to estimate, plan, write some user stories around building an online shop. I want your teams to imagine that you have been asked to tender for a piece of work to build an online shop. And I hand out a piece of paper, and I say, there's more details in this piece of paper, and I hand them out. When people come back to me 20 minutes later and we hear the competing bid, the teams on the right will want $1 million, and they will want 6 months, a year, maybe 3 years. And the teams on the left, some of them will say, we'll do it this afternoon, and they may want as much as $5,000. And they both come up with a solution to building an online shop. The teams on the right have been given a piece of paper that say, as a multinational company, I want to sell widgets online. I've budgeted $1.2 million for this. And the teams on the left have a piece of paper that says, as a home-based artisan widget maker, I want to give up my day job and sell widgets. My accountant tells me a website will cost $5,000. There is more than one way to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And the money you have available, the time you have available, are the constraints you have. Your job, and particularly this is for those people who think of themselves as engineers, your job is to engineer a solution within those constraints. And if frankly it's impossible, then you need to communicate that and you need to find alternatives. But there's more than one solution.
Yeah. So let's just take one more question, then we'll look to wrap up. And so Anissa asks, as a BA, how can you contribute to OKRs, especially if you've never worked with OKRs before? So if someone's in a business analysis role, I know, Alan, earlier you said, there's the just do it approach, which is which is part of it. But any other tips for actually hitting the ground running?
So I suppose the first one is learn about themselves, learn about them yourself, go and immerse yourself in them. Measure What Matters by John Doerr is the holy Bible of OKRs. I hate to say it, I've got some quibbles in places with it. He's not completely true to himself, and also some of his examples are drawn from when he worked at Intel in the 70s. But still, it's the book everybody reads.
Yeah.
There are other books out there, including mine.
Do you mustn't forget to mention that, Alan. That's an important. By the way, Alan, people are saying that your form won't let any submissions. So I think maybe.
I know what it is. Okay, folks, I am awfully sorry because there's a switch I need to flip on Google's, and I forgot to flip it from when I did this last time.
Maybe if you do the draw in like 24 hours, then anyone who watches the recording can get a chance to play as well. So
good idea. The form is now fixed. You should get the form.
If you quickly post that in the chat as well, just
well, it's the same link.
Same link. Okay, fantastic.
Open to everyone. Thank you. Where learning yourself. Yeah. So don't rely on winning a book. Go out and buy yourself Measure What Matters. Buy another good book. There are plenty of blogs out there now on it. There are podcasts on it. You know, the resources are out there. So start by doing your homework. Do your bit. And then start by talking to the people you work with and start saying, look, if we were to pursue this, what would our objective be? What would our key results be? And just do a dry run for yourself with some friends, some colleagues, and then perhaps start to see if you can get your rest of your team to buy into doing some. And as always with BA, you know, you are part of your role is bringing the outside world in. The team are the people creating the solution. You are the people understanding what the problem is, what the need is, what the want is, and what are the important aspects of that. And you know, BAs are never shy to talk about strategy. So throw in some strategic thinking. You know, just try doing it, learning by doing. You know, just learn about them yourselves. Try doing it, even if it's a book exercise.
Yeah, fantastic. And just before we close, Alan, if you had one sort of in a word or a couple of words, if you had like one biggest takeaway, the one thing you want people watching this to take away or go away and do, what would that one thing be, other than obviously buy the book?
When you're crafting the objectives, particularly, but those sort of key results as well, don't be scared to make your value, your benefit, what people get from this, why this is a good outcome. Make it blindingly obvious. You know, go back to yourself and challenge yourself. Well, challenge yourself in all sorts of ways in OKR. You know, the Elon Musk quote, did I mention this before about the first order of business is to think hard, think until your head hurts. Challenge yourself at OKRs. Challenge yourself to craft your limited number of OKRs as blindingly obvious in terms of benefit and value as you can be.
Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, thinking really hard and prioritizing and thinking strategically, so very important. And so Alan, I'm sure people will want to stay in touch. They want to know more about the book. I mean, I know you can buy it on Amazon. How's the best way for people to find out more about what you do, to stay in touch?
If you Google Allan Kelly, you will find me, a tank collector and a marriage guidance counsellor. And maybe a tailor as well. You'll work out which one I am. Generally, if you're looking on Twitter or somewhere, I'm Allan Kelly Net, and I tend to use that handle most places. Allan Kelly is a very common name. I'll post my LinkedIn address in the chat there. Once again, it's LinkedIn/in/Allan Kelly Net. Please connect me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Twitter, Google me, keep up, and on the book draw page, there's an opportunity to sign up for my blog subscription.
Fantastic. Well, Alan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and apologies to that. I mean, you're always a very popular webinar guest, and we always have more questions than we're able to answer in the time. But hopefully, people will connect with you on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. So for those of you that are tuned in live, just stay on for about another minute or so, just a couple of closing announcements. First of all, the next webinar I have is in just a few weeks' time. It's in the chat now. It's on the 1st of June with Jen Bedell, and it's change management versus business analysis. Where is the line drawn? I'm very much looking forward to that one, because hopefully I'll find out where the line is drawn, because I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Also on the 3rd of June, there is the BA Open Mic Night. If you've not been to that yet, that is really your chance to take the virtual stage, have a 3-minute speaking slot. It's not recorded, it's conversational. It's a bit like networking, really, that type of thing. And if you haven't seen the quarterly publication, BA Digest, do take a look at that. That's a quarterly magazine, completely free. You don't need to register or anything like that. You can just click on it and view it or download it. But if you like it, you can sign up to have it in your inbox. So do take a look at that as well. And then finally, one final, I think, exciting announcement, and I just need to very, very quickly get my screen ready for sharing. So just bear with me while I... make sure you keep July the 15th free in your diary, because there is a multidisciplinary conference, half-day festival, which is going to be looking at business analysis, business change, project management, a whole bunch of other topics. The agenda is now released. You can take a look at it here. You can got lots of topics on soft skills, hard skills, all of those sorts of things. And it's going to focus on, also not just the prepared sessions, but also networking and, actually meeting other people and creating connections between people. It's Serendipity is the conference. So as you'll see from the URL there, serendipityfest.com. But you're probably thinking, well, how much does it cost? Because these things cost money. And the difference with this one is it is completely free. So if you click on the register button, all you need to do is put your details in there, and you will get a free place to that conference. It's in Eastern time, so it's about 3 till 8 p.m. UK time. Yeah, check that out. It's going to be really, I'm really excited about that. All that's left for me to say is a big thank you to everyone who has attended live, or indeed who is watching the recording. Huge thanks to you, Alan. Always a pleasure. We could talk for hours on these topics, and I'm sure we will again sometime. So enjoy your evenings, everyone, and see you again soon. But bye for now. Take care.